little bit about what that means to me and some tips that I've kind of encountered. And as I said, please feel free to chime in if something works well at your institution. If there's something going on that you think that we could all benefit in hearing, I'd love to hear it. So the first thing is, I know when I first started a couple of years ago, and even prior to that, a lot of times the technology is purchased, it's sent out to the faculty, it's sent out to the staff. Here, use this. There's some training involved. There are some, tutorials developed, but there really isn't a dialogue that happens between the faculty and the technology department about what do you actually want to do. What are the things you're trying to accomplish by using technology in the classroom? So I came across two competing definitions. If I can get this to work. There we go. Two competing definitions of instructional tech. Well, now it's skipping ahead. Back. There we go. Hopefully that'll stay on the screen this time. Any technology used to facilitate learning, whether in the classroom or through distance, or, and this is the one that I really like, a design process that incorporates technology. I think that if you have a good design process, if you have that process where you are talking to faculty and seeing what they need, you kind of envelop the first one. Because you're going to see, okay, they need this particular technology to deliver their course in a way that matches a learning outcome. So when I ran across this, I thought, well, wait a minute, this is really kind of cool. It's kind of interesting because I get the question all the time, what do I need to be using in my classroom if I'm doing online education? Well, the truth is, I can't answer that question. I don't think any of us can really answer that question from just that. You have to talk and see, what are you teaching? I came from a different background, so law school to me and the way it's taught was a totally different concept. So you had to have those conversations and find out, what are you actually trying to get at? Are you trying to replace an in-class discussion? Are you trying to just do a voiceover lecture? Do you need something real robust? Do you need something that's not quite so much? What's your learning curve? Where are you at with technology? Have you ever seen PowerPoint? If you haven't, we need to start in a different spot and go from there. Okay, so the changing landscape, this was actually one of the first computers ever developed, which was called the ENIAC. And I'm going to show you a slide here that compares it with what they did in 1995, which was put this on a chip. So that's just in the span, and then of course today we have this. And this is just obviously just a small sample of what we have. I mean, we are all walking with phones, we're all walking with iPads or tablets, and we have our laptops. So what's really interesting about that, the first ENIAC, which is what it was called, and it did computations, was in a 50 by 30 room. It had 18,000 vacuum tubes, and I won't go through each of these. The second one, though, the chip, was about 8 millimeters. So it's tiny. Just in that span of time, and that was until from the 50s to the 95, or the 30s to 95. Now, think of what we've done since 95 to the current day. Just a few things that we have. I apologize, these are transitioning a little slow. And these are all going to jump up in a different way because they all do different things, and I just thought that was kind of funny. But these are just a few things that we're throwing at students, faculty, and that they're already using maybe. Maybe they're bringing this into the classroom. The only thing missing is that. We really are throwing everything but the kitchen sink at faculty. And it's hard to navigate that. It's hard to understand, from even my perspective when I'm teaching, I see the new shiny thing and I want to use it, but it may not be something that works. I tested a software and a conferencing package this last term in what I taught, and it didn't work as well. I couldn't tell who was in the room. It didn't have any tracking features I needed, but you don't know that on the outset. And for someone who's an early adopter, that might not be a big issue. But for a faculty member who's not, it's a frustration that could very well turn very ugly because they want to be competent in what they're doing. Okay, so now obviously this is a very rudimentary table, but this, from my perspective, kind of the traditional roles of higher education. Your administration handles all of the financials, buys the software packages, usually informed by IT. IT will give them suggestions, but sometimes sometimes it's just purchased, IT handles all of the hardware, the software, the data management, information policies. And like I said, they do far more than this, but these are just the things that I see. Faculty are in charge of instruction and pedagogy, course design. And of course, the students are the end users and pretty much haven't been as involved in the process as they probably should be or could be. I think they're becoming more so because they're becoming more consumers and telling us what they need. But the thing is, these are your traditional roles, which of course have begun to blur. And again, this is just my concept of what the technologist role is in this. And I don't focus on students. I don't focus on, I talk about the idea of how my role fits into navigating the waters between faculty and the technology, the IT department. The instructional technologist, to me, is someone who has to be at least versed in adult education principles as far as learning styles, understanding active listening, and being able to engage. You need to create that dialogue between not only you and the faculty and you and the IT department, but between the two. You need to be able to collaborate between all of those spheres and be competent in what you're talking about. Obviously, you aren't going to know everything. I can't do a lot of things in the IT department, but I can find somebody who does and find somebody who knows how to do specific things. And I'm not faculty, so I can still have a conversation there, but they have to tell us exactly what they need. They have to be honest, they have to be open, and they have to communicate. You have to have instructional design, some kind of a knowledge in instructional design, backwards design preferably, because once again, you find out what they need. It's a lot easier to match them to a tool. And not every tool will fit every situation. Customer service, I attended a presentation yesterday where they said you never say no. I would second that and say that's an absolute truth. Challenges are opportunities. There is no such thing as failure. There's just a different way to get it done. So for me, that's kind of I had a 18-year career in customer service. So I bring that in, and I think it's a very important piece of understanding that when they're coming to you, they already have questions. And if you can't find someone to be able to give them answers, you're not going to help them succeed because they want to be successful. On both sides. The IT department does not want to have to, go in and, I guess, be the one who's, they can't wear all hats. Just like the instructional technologist and faculty member. You can't wear all hats. You can't be an expert. Yesterday with the purple squirrel I thought was awesome because that's what we expect. A lot of the times you expect, even if you call a business, you expect them to answer all of your questions, know everything you need to know, and give you this wonderful magical answer, and you're done. there are baby steps, there are things that have to take place, and there are ways to still make them think that, but as a collaborative process. You know, I went to Ed and he called 4 people, and guess what? We got a solution. Those kinds of things are very important. And negotiation. You know, what is actually possible without saying no? You know, how do you actually match? You know, sometimes I'll have a faculty member come to me and they'll say, oh, I want to use Adobe Captivate. It's so cool. I saw this presentation that somebody did. And it's one of those faculty members who may not know PowerPoint. So the learning curve, or that's all they've done is PowerPoint. So the learning curve on a tool like Captivate is extremely high. But then you start having that conversation, you start talking about it, and you find out that what they really want to do is put their PowerPoint slides up and narrate. Then you can really assess, okay, well, here's a tool that's a little bit less of a learning curve. Here's some tutorials for Captivate if we want to move there after this. And you get them started so that they begin to see the value. Then you start to ramp things up. Any questions at this point? Any? No? Okay. Now, I already talked about, you know, to me it's about building a relationship. One thing I'm very privileged to have is I have a good relationship not only at the law school with the IT department, because I'm technically based in the library. So I report to the library director, and so I'm not in the IT chain of command, but I'm lucky enough I can pick up the phone and I can talk to them and I can ask them questions and I can help fill in the gaps in my own knowledge. And then I can kind of offer support that way. I'm also connected to the Centers for Teaching and Learning, which are our campus, instructional technology gurus who, you know, support the campus-wide effort to bring in new technologies. And then, of course, we have the UITS department that does the whole university system. But the big thing on building relationships is that you have to recognize, at least I do, that I'm not going to know everything. I have to know who to call. Or I can email somebody, which this is what my email box will look like when I get back, and what it looks like a little bit now. If that doesn't work, I can pick up the phone. I tried to get as close to the bat phone as I could, but I couldn't get that. You know, I couldn't find that little red phone. And then if all else fails, I can walk over and talk to somebody. And a lot of times I'll go knock on somebody's door and say, hey, do you have a minute? I need to talk to you about, you know, a project that we're working on. A faculty member came to me about, I don't know how to make this happen. I need you to, you know, kind of walk me through this and help me get from here to there. Now, this slide, you know, talks a little bit about that, and I don't put faculty on here because faculty are who we are serving, so they're having the conversation with any one component in the funnel. But to me, it's a collaborative effort between the IT department, the technologist, and in our case, the teaching centers, because they have the staff and the knowledge and the expertise to be able to see the larger picture other than just where we're at. It's a lot easier for them because they get the toys. You know, they get the toys before I get the toys. I don't get to see all of the software. I have as much of it as I can download, but obviously there's a whole team of them working on different projects and different aspects of teaching technologies. So I was fortunate enough, IU is going to Canvas, the Canvas learning management system, and the Center for Teaching and Learning invited me to participate in a sandbox where they just tossed around ideas, went through the system, looked at, you know, what it does, what it doesn't do, what are the challenges, and that was an eye-opener for me. I had used it on the pilot basis. I knew a little bit. I know a fair bit about it. But when you start looking at all the different perspectives in the room as to how it actually integrates, it's amazing to see what you missed. You know, and as we go forward with that specifically, the law school, the way the grading is done, by wanting to see one question for the entirety of the students, so you want all that on one page and you want to grade by question, that doesn't work well in Canvas. It doesn't work at all in Canvas. So it's something we needed to know in order to be able to find an alternative, and basically we're using the old LMS to be able to grade, so we're sending them out of Canvas to do tests and surveys. But those are the things that just don't come up unless you're asking questions. You have to ask those questions, because otherwise you're gonna find out that a faculty member is frustrated because they go to the grade by question in Canvas and it takes them to each student question number 5. So they can't do that comparison that they need to be able to do to write a standardized feedback for the class. Now, I promise, this was not because of yesterday's lecture at the keynote. Don't get distracted by the tools. This is, if you haven't seen the movie, this is Hammy. Steve Carell voices Hammy in the movie Over the Hedge. I have kids. Hammy is the lovable red squirrel who decided that everything he sees he wants. So he'll be standing there and he'll go ball, and he'll run, and he'll go here, and he'll go there, and he'll go all over the place. He never stops and thinks about anything. All he does is run around. I'm a lot like that when it comes to technology. I have to rein myself in. I want all of the new tools. I want to play with all of the new stuff. When Adobe Captivate came out, it was on my computer immediately once IU got the license agreement. Articulate Storyline, all these different tools. I love to play around with this stuff. Sometimes all that white noise gets in the way of what you're trying to do. Because what you're trying to do is engage faculty and make them want to adopt technology so that they can better impact their students in the way that they want to do it. And that is where Hammy kind of needs to just be, see if this time's right, and it doesn't, but throw him away. So just wad him up and throw him away. Still be excited about the technology, but realize there's a difference between what you're playing with on your system and what you can do versus what the people who are coming to see you can do and what they want to do. That was a hard thing for me to learn. I wanted to throw everybody into, we use Articulate Storyline in the law library to do our online course because it has access on mobile devices real easy. And it took a while for me to realize that, okay, that isn't the end all be all. There are times when Adobe Presenter is a much better option for the faculty member who's doing their course. I thought this was an interesting quote, or not a quote, but something I took out and kind of summarized. 88% of faculty believe technology is crucial in the classrooms. However, there are significant barriers such as funding levels, knowledge of how to use the technology, and knowledge of how to use the technology. You know, you hate the word fear, but there is this trepidation out there by faculty. They don't know how to use the technology. None of us want to walk into a situation where we look like we don't know what we're doing. I don't want to come into a presentation and look like, or start to demo a program and I haven't done the requisite amount of study to be able to use that program. That's what we're asking in some cases faculty to do. Oh, just try it, you'll like it, you know? And then they get in there and it doesn't work the first time, it doesn't work the second time, and they're frustrated, they're angry, their students are giving them bad evaluations in some cases. You know, I've seen it. I've seen evaluations where the students will say, well, the professor didn't even know the technology, so how am I supposed to learn? And that's not, In some cases, maybe it would be an individual failing, but usually not. It's usually somewhere along the way. It may be someone who didn't want the technology to work, but to me, those are the rare exceptions. If they're using it, they want to be successful in it. Now, they may not adopt it or want it to begin with, but once they're using it, they want to appear competent and be competent. Do you have a question? Oh, I thought your arm went up. So, we have to kind of facilitate that. I mean, that's why I love my job. That's my whole job, is to try to help people feel comfortable in what they're wanting to do. Now, this is just me as far as what it can look like. This is a very rudimentary diagram. I couldn't find one I really liked, and I didn't really know how to make it to really fit what I wanted to say, but everything starts with that discussion. That discussion is the crucial point. Then analyzing out of that discussion what the actual needs are and kind of how to get there. And then, depending on what it is, sometimes if it's a faculty member who wants to just do their own, I'll stop there. And I'll be a resource if they call me if they're having problems with a software package. But I'm not going to go through and design it for them if that's not what they want. Now, if they do need more of an idea of how it's going to look, that's when the storyboarding piece will come in. And I'll send them a small mock-up on the storyboard of here's how I see it, and they'll take a look at that and let me know where the tweaks are. Because I can't map it out for them. Like I said, I don't teach law. If you come to me and you're wanting to teach legal process, which was one of the faculty came to me with, you're going to have to tell me how you teach it so that I can then tell you what maybe the best way is to approach it, because it's a different way of teaching in a lot of cases. And then assessment. Did it work? Did the students like it? Was it easy to navigate? Was it easy for did the professor like it? Did it represent what they thought it was going to? In that same legal process course, what we ended up doing was there was a pattern of errors test that they used, and it's for legal writing, and it was done in print for years. So it was part of a book that students would go through, they would mark correct or incorrect on the underlined words, and then at the end they would circle all of the answers they got. What we ended up doing was putting that in Articulate Storyline with a bunch of triggers and layers so that now the student could click on a C or an I located under each underlined passage, and it would give them their score on each page at the bottom, and it would take them to a layer that told them what the correct answer was regardless of whether they got it right or wrong, because the professor thought, what if they guessed? What if they only got it right because they guessed? I want them to see the correct answer no matter how they come to it. Which was something I, quite frankly, hadn't thought about. To me, it was, you got it right, you got it wrong. If you got it wrong, we'll tell you why you got it wrong. So it was a very good, that's where that conversation came in and was very valuable. Because if she hadn't had that thought to tell me that, and that was after the original design, she said, go in, change this, make it show that layer regardless. And by the way, that one did work, and it's still in use for now. So hopefully there are times where the faculty member said, I didn't care for it, we'll try it again. Let's do something different. Now, what I'm going to talk about next, I'm just going to give some examples, and this is where I'd like, if you all have any kinds of examples yourselves, because my process is my process. I'm not telling anyone here that this is how you should do it. It works for me, and by having a dialogue back and forth, hopefully there's something, maybe a couple of my components work for you, maybe, you have something that'll help improve the way I do it. But the online legal research class, when I was first hired at the law library, they didn't really know what my job was going to do. I went into an empty cube with no institutional history, and they said, you're going to support our online legal research class first of all, and then we'll see what happens after that. That was my biggest learning curve. That's where I was hammy running around wanting to implement every single thing and thinking that I knew more than anybody else. And not in a, I don't think, an arrogant way, but just, hey, you need me because you hired me, so here's what I want to do. So I'm throwing out all these suggestions, and it didn't really work for what legal research, the way it was taught. The course was well established. It had been going on for 2 years. It's completely online, and it's taught the 2 L's. So once I finally kind of backed off a little, then I started to realize what the real issues were and ways that I could actually be effective. And one of those ways was when we talked about Articulate Storyline, because a student came in, was in the law library, and had an iPad. That's all they had. They didn't have anything else. Didn't have a laptop. Didn't have a desktop at home or in the apartment. They just had an iPad. All of our presentations for the legal research class at the time were in Adobe Presenter and Adobe Captivate, which at that point in time did not publish an MP4. That student could not engage with the material in the class using the iPad. That's when we started looking at a different software piece. Now, since then, we've made a lot of different changes and improvements. We used a version of Sakai prior to going to Canvas, and they do a lot of CSS files to make it look prettier, look more attractive. They use a lesson builder, which is a lot nicer than the traditional modules. Canvas goes back to modules, which they aren't happy about the name change, but they like the functionality and they like to try new things. They've done a pilot of Canvas since I've been there. They were in the initial pilot before IU adopted it. And so it's really been a successful class. The law librarians are extremely open to suggestions, and they're quick to tell me if I'm off base. If I'm off target, they're going to tell me, hey, we don't want to do that because it's just not how we do things. And that's a really good open dialogue. Now, the legal process, we talked a little bit about that. What happened probably about 6 months after I was in the law library, I was told that a former dean, and that's an understatement to say the least, probably the most famous former dean of the law school, was going to walk into my cube and talk to me. And he came in and he said, I want to be able to give a lecture from home. And I said, okay, well, what do you use, And he said, oh no, I take that back. That was this year. The first time he came in, he wanted to put a book online. He'd written his own book, and it was in this huge Word document. And he wanted to be able to engage students in a way that allowed them to ask him direct questions and him to be able to answer in real time if he wanted to throughout the book. Now, we used CourseLoad, but CourseLoad would not do that unless you had an ebook at the time. So he couldn't upload the document into CourseLoad and allow comments and do it that way. So what they ended up doing, I had a meeting with him, Andrew Myers, who at the time, now he's our web developer, but at the time he was working in another capacity on the IT staff. We went with Dean Bepko to the Center for Teaching and Learning and sat down with a consultant, and all of us brainstormed on how can we best make this happen. And the solution ended up being embedding test and survey links into our LMS so that the student, it was a survey question, the student could click on the link, ask their question or give their response. He could grade it even though it was no grade, and the student would see it completely private, completely confidential. And it was a long process, but once that was done, it was an absolute win for what he was trying to do in his classroom. So it was really one of those times when you sit there and you go, okay, I'd have never thought of that, because I didn't. I was really trying to think of some cool way we could use Articulate or Adobe Presenter, and that wasn't functional for what needed to happen. But the only way that that came out was in that room with that CTL consultant and their experience and their knowledge of the systems that filled in the gaps from what I had had. Another thing are the voiceover presentations. I actually recommend Adobe Presenter a lot just because it's easy for the faculty to learn because it's a plug-in into PowerPoint, which is a space that they generally feel comfortable in. And of course, that's institution specific because IU has an enterprise agreement with Adobe. So for us, that makes a lot of sense. It's something that the faculty just goes to a page and downloads. Now, you'll see my last one here, the Mac with the 2 exclamation points. Adobe Presenter does not work on a Mac unless you install Parallels. Now, many of our faculty members, not many, I don't know how many faculty members we have on a Mac, but the ones we do have are very much on a Mac. They do not want to deal with Windows. However, when I say I've got this really cool tool that you're probably going to like, and I show them in my office, and I say, bring your laptop, because if it is a Mac, I need to see it. Then they'll look at the tool, they'll say, man, I love that. Okay, well, here are the steps we've got to take. You have to go to the IT department. The IT department has to install Parallels. Once you install Parallels, we'll install Windows on your machine. Then we'll install Adobe. I mean, I walked through all those processes. The same is true of Articulate Storyline, which we own in the library. So you've got to be real cognizant of where they are and what technologies they're comfortable using. And there's a learning curve, knowing which the Windows side and the Mac side on Parallels and what to turn off and where to store your files and how to get, how to engage with that. And, another workaround to that, of course, was Adobe Connect. Adobe Connect can be used from anywhere. It's not as user-friendly as a PowerPoint, but there are some faculty who did not want to install any, what they considered to be, an abomination on their Mac. So they did not want to install the Parallels or the Windows. And if that's the case, well, here's another possibility for you. So, and of course, there are more examples I can give as far as how we've come to this process. I'm running a little fast than I usually do. But when you begin this process, one thing they taught me early on in adult education when I was in my master's program was I don't know everything. Matter of fact, I don't know anything until I've talked to somebody and we've had a conversation about it. Then I find out actually what I know, and I learn from them about what they know. And it's amazing what happens in that space. The presentation yesterday that I was in, and I am blanking on the presenters, but when they talked about being able to just stand back and listen, just shut up, just listen to what people are saying. That right there will inform what the next steps are probably going to be. Because if you show empathy to other people, if you actually say, okay, what's frustrating you, you're going to come around and they're going to want to talk to you. They want you to help them, or else they would not be at your door or on the phone or anywhere else for that matter. They would go to someone they feel like they can talk to, because that's what the point is. I have an open door. My door never closes unless I'm in a consultation with a faculty member about a specific tool, or I'm on a conference call, something like that, where I have to have my door shut. My door in the library is consistently open. Prior to that, I was in a cube. So, I literally, any time, and you can't underestimate that one-on-one contact. If I'm not doing something at the moment and I get a phone call from the 3rd floor from a faculty member who can't get Adobe Connect to work, are you in your office? I'll be right there. Now, they recognize if I'm busy, or if I'm doing something else, we'll schedule a time. But if you catch me in between, I'll come up and we'll see what the problem is and we'll fix it. And if we can't fix it, we'll make a few phone calls and figure out how. So that willingness to be able to balance, okay, I'm too busy, versus how much credit something like, well, you know, Ed just came up to the office the other day because I happened to be here and I was trying to do this and it was frustrating me, and we got it solved in like 5 minutes. That 5 minutes means a ton. So, and it goes both ways. If, you know, I was fortunate enough to be invited to the online teaching task force at McKinney by one of the professors because they wanted to have a different perspective other than faculty. They didn't want just a faculty perspective on how do we teach online. They invited me to come and sit at the table. And that, to me, that was both humbling, and it kind of illustrates what I talk about, that I want the process to be like, because they wanted my input. They wanted to know what, you know, my thoughts were on how do we teach law, which is the most restrictive online space in the world. How do we do that? What do we do? And at the time, I didn't know anything about ABA rules, and so there was a huge learning curve on my end about, okay, so you can't teach, but this much online? How does that work? How far can you go and consider it, you know, not an online class? So that kind of opened my eyes, but it also allowed us, and since then, faculty has pretty much taken back over that process, and they're presenting on technologies that are, I mean, faculty members are bringing in different technologies and showing them to each other, which is really, really cool. The first couple, I did some presentations on some stuff. Some of the other members did presentations, but then they opened it up, and faculty from all over. Faculty using Macs, faculty using Windows, faculty using new design tools. We even had one on, I think, Google Hangout, which was, you know, one faculty member used that as a collaborative tool. And he was like, hey, I want to show this to everybody, and let them take a look at it. So, any questions, comments? Like I said, I'm running a little early, so.
You talked about storyboarding. Could you show us an example or describe, like, say, how would you put together a storyboard for, you know, telling law librarians how to, you know, do an online research class, something like that?
Well, and usually and that's a good question. The question was, how would I put on, or how would I design a storyboard for an entire class? I wouldn't. What I would do would be to take components. When we have that dialogue back and forth, they may say, I want to do a discussion forum, or I want to do some kind of a collaborative process. And when I say storyboard, that's my way of kind of thinking about it. It's usually a Word document with like a flow chart of, you know, you need to have clear objectives of what you want them to say in the postings, because a lot of times we'll throw a discussion post out and we won't give a minimum word requirement. We won't give, you know, the right information for the student to be successful in engaging with that. If they're wanting to do something online as far as using Adobe Presenter or using Articulate, not only will I send them tutorials, but a lot of times I'll create a document that walks them through, and I'll create a mock-up. I actually, when I had the one-on-one consultation with the former dean concerning Adobe Presenter, I actually had an Adobe Presenter little example that I had made up, and I put a screen right where he was sitting, and we walked through exactly how I did that so that he could see the process. So sometimes it's something I send to them. Sometimes it's an actual live demo. I use the term storyboarding because it fluctuates in how I do that. Other questions, comments? I really don't want to let you all go this early. Yes?
I use transition to Canvas.
Yes.
And then some challenges with that. Can you expand on that just a little bit? Are you not using Canvas, or are you using it for some things and using Sakai?
Sakai was the original, what we had. So OnCourse was our name for the LMS that we had. And the question was, are we using Canvas, are we not using Canvas, or are we using like a combination? It depends. In the law school right now, one of the things that is, I would say, probably frustrating from the student side is the options that they have in the classroom. Some of our instructors still use Twin, some use OnCourse, some are going to Canvas. So going into that environment, a student could technically have a class in all three learning management systems, which you talk about shell shock, I would imagine that would be it. Canvas does a lot of things exceptionally well. At the university level, it was the right decision 100%. I did the pilot, I was involved in a panel on it here about a month and a half ago, and it does some things extremely well from a collaboration perspective. It allows you to do a lot of different things. Now, in a lot of ways, the law school doesn't want to encourage that collaboration in some of the classes. Some of the classes need to be more locked down, and Canvas kind of pushes, it doesn't do that real well. So we're trying to find ways to be able to make it fit better into the law school's curriculum. Now, with the legal research class, which is the one I have the most experience with, the grade by question is the big problem. It's a huge problem. It's 100 and something students, and they need to be able to see all the students on one page. Canvas will not do it. They're trying to figure out how to make it work, but it doesn't work. So what we have to do, everything else is designed in Canvas, but the assessments. The assessments link out to OnCourse, which is Sakai, and then when they go in there, they're graded, they can list them by all on a page, they can institute the feedback, and then they have to publish a document on Canvas saying here's the feedback and that. So it's a process. We're trying to get that worked out by the fall to where we can design the assessments in Canvas, because for those of you who haven't used Canvas, it's very elegant, it's very easy to use. If you want to create a new page, you click the button that says create a new page. It automatically populates subsites for collaboration, which is really cool. Your students, you aren't having to build out all this extra functionality. You can grade from your iPad. You can do all kinds of crazy stuff. So, I mean, I think from a university perspective, it was the right move. And I think that the law school, the professors I know who have seen it and used it, love it. It just has to be customized to fit, once again, what they need. And so far, the talks with Canvas are pretty positive in that direction. They want it to be able to do what we want it to do. Now, whether or not, how quickly that's going to happen, I don't know the answer. But great question. Thank you. Anything else? Comments, questions? Yes?
Do most faculty members come to you, or do you go one by one each faculty member to find out their needs?
Like I said, my position's kind of, the way my reporting structure is kind of odd in that I'm in the library. So faculty generally come to me if they have an issue, or a lot of times Terry Cuellar is actually our head of IT. She refers them to me if they have a question. Our director, the library director, of course, goes to all the faculty meetings. She'll refer people my way. The main thing is I have to balance what I have to do and my responsibilities in the library with being able to support the faculty in the law school at large. And so far, my director's been very good about saying as long as you can do that, you can pretty much do what you need to do. You know, you can have those conversations, you can work with faculty, but if it starts to encroach on what you're able to do to help us and support us, because it's far more than just moving things online. It can be with, our library director teaches animal law, and a lot of times I'm doing things with video and I'm doing things with embedding different things into Twin and different things into, she's going to probably move to Canvas, I think. But, you know, so my job kind of jumps around to whatever's needed in a lot of cases. You know, being able to turn a YouTube video into an MP4 so that it can be easier for her to show or embed those are the kinds of things sometimes that I do, but then there are things where we sit down and we're actually talking about the course design. So it's kind of a wide range of, here's everything you can think of. Let's see what we can do with it. So good question, though. Yes?
We have just an IT staff and the faculty with nobody in between, like somebody specifically for a teaching technologist. One challenge we see is the faculty saying, hey, this is what I want to do in the room. This is what I want to do for class Wednesday. This is what I want you to prepare and get ready for. Take this, run with it, just tell me when it's ready. And I'll say, well, can we sit down and even talk about it? And sometimes we even have faculty who are, yeah, I'll be coming in 10 minutes before class. We'll talk about it then. How do you find the line of empowering them to do what they want to do on their own versus, you want to give them good support and do as much as possible, but you can't prepare everyone's presentation for them for every class. How do you play that line?
Yeah, that's a great question as far as how to balance between doing it for them and, kind of working out a partnership of, how do we get it done? And that actually, we had a professor who wanted to tape a reenactment of a court session, of testimony, wanted to have students reenact that and be able to turn that into a replacement assignment for something. I think it was a snow day, or there's some day that they missed where they ended up needing to move that into an online space. So the first thing is to be honest, without saying no, to be honest about how long something may take. I've always found the easiest way to communicate that. A lot of the times you're right. They'll come in and they'll say, we want this and we want to do it tomorrow. Okay, well, here's how long that'll take. And the first question I ask is, how much time do you have? Because there are some things you can rapid fire and there are some things you can't. If you can, great, you look like a superstar. If you can't, then you have to figure out, okay, well, we can do this time, but we may need to do something, more robust later. In that particular case, it was actually a collaboration between myself and the IT department on using a camera we had in the law library that nobody even knew we had, except for the one librarian who had gotten it like 2 years before, and having one of the IT staff in the room to record the video and then bringing it back to me, and I did the video edit. It was just one of those things, and it was, there's a difference between everything you want and good enough. The professor wanted to be able to use that as an interactive, quizzing almost, or comment thing, kind of similar to what we did with the online book. I told him how long that would take to be able to do that. I could have it by the next week, but I needed a list of questions. I laid out what I needed from them, and he said, no, we'll do that next time. I'll just have the students email me. Because then it becomes their decision. So to me, that's always the big plus, because if they see, okay, wait a minute, yeah, that sounds awesome, but we don't have time for that, then they're making the decision of what's more important. Does that make sense? I'm not trying to talk around it, but that's, to me, once you're engaged and they trust you, once you're having that conversation and they trust that you're doing all you can in their best interest, they are going to be more open to letting you off the hook if it's something that's going to be outside of their time frame. They'll say, okay, well, we can do what he did, which kind of worries me, is he had them all email him, and it was like 100 students, so that could be messy. But, that was his decision to do that, and he knows there's another option later. So.
I just want to tag on to that. Before Ed was hired, he's been there.
A little over 2 years.
Before Ed was hired, we had the same situation. And when he was hired, he was originally hired just to work with the library. So we didn't have the option to say at first, go see Ed, because he's the guy with all the tools. So we had to try to, work with the faculty, and what we did was try to enlist their staff, and tried to get them to work more on, developing and, putting together things. When somebody would come to us and say, this happens a lot, that they say, can you create a spreadsheet for me to do such and such? Like, no, but, we'll talk to your faculty assistant, and, there are things that are technology issues, and there are things that are staff, support staff issues, and you kind of have to get that line and draw it and stick with it, because they don't stop coming to you just because you tell them they're going to keep coming. So, but now that we have, it's a luxury really to have a position like this, but I think with the turn toward online education and the changes that are happening in law schools just because of the enrollment situation and everything, law schools are changing, and this is a position that I think law schools are going to have to look at and get, because the IT staff isn't, that we don't have the capability to do the sit down, time consuming stuff that it does.
And remember, my position was brand new, so I didn't know what I was doing either. That's, my learning curve was as steep as anybody's because of the fact that, I was an instructional designer, and I kind of did a little bit of consulting on the instructional design side. But I knew a lot of theory, and I had been in the business world training people for years, but I hadn't, done anything like this in academics. So for me, kind of it was cool for me to be able to define the position. It was really nice to be able to come in and say, okay, I support the library, and then I had somebody mention a faculty member, and then I asked the director, can I talk to them? And it was all about relationships. That's what it is. It has nothing to do with I'm so great. It has nothing to do with I'm the expert, because in many cases I'm not. In many cases I'm shuffling people. I'm playing that that navigator role of, here, we're going to the next stop on the train. You need to get off here. You can get on, and we'll go to the next one, and we'll move around. Because that's what I think is I don't know if you call it a gift or what, but is to be able to ask questions and talk to other people and realize how they can lock into what my knowledge gaps are. I'm the king of the Rolodex, I always say, because I've got a list, and my contacts are the same way. I've got a list of people that I can call about anything, and they also know that they can call me about anything. So it has to be a two-way street. I don't think there's any other way to do it.
What's your title?
My title is Instructional Technology Specialist. I'm called many things in the library, but my director still calls me an educational technologist, and she hired me. But that's my actual title, is Instructional Technology Specialist. So, yes.
Do you have the support of the university? Say a faculty member wants to do something in like WordPress, but they want to kind of redesign the page. They don't want to use like the templates, and it involves some like PHP work maybe. Now, would you actually do all that work on the back end to get the pages to look the way that you normally would, or do you have the luxury of having kind of coaching all on?
I don't know if Andrew and them would do that or not. We have someone in the library that could help, as far as if they had a staff member that could, come in and do that. Hannah Al-Qasid, she works with me and in our group. She does our mobile site. She codes it, and it's all PHP. So, we would have some expertise to draw on. I'm not a coder any more than I am a software developer. I'm very well aware of my limitations, but what I would do is try to do everything I could to get them to somebody who could help them. And, that may take 2, 3, 4 phone calls, and most of which they won't ever know about. But, to tell them, okay, here's the person you need to speak to. Center for Teaching and Learning may be able to do that for them. I don't know how much they would support on WordPress, but, Tom Janke and some of them.
What's their role in relation to the rest of the university? So the other departments don't have they don't have an ed.
Well,
Do they rely then on those
Well, they do, and in some cases, for example, the medical school has an embedded CTL person, Center for Teaching and Learning person. Engineering and Technology has an embedded person where CTL pays half their salary and the school pays half their salary. But no, if they don't have someone who's embedded, the CTL handles the rest of the campus. So you go to the CTL, they have a whole bank of computers and consultants, and then they will sit down with you and they will talk to you. They'll come into your class and observe your class for you if you want, to kind of help you with, you know, the design of it. So they're really a great resource. Really are. All right. If nothing else, we're only 5 minutes early, so we did all right. Thank you all very much.
Canvas.
Well, like for example, the thing with research, they want to get their assessments, they want to be great about questions.
Yeah, that's what I'm starting to say.
Now, you're a lot, I mean, so that's where the difference is. The leading the research labs is the student, so that's,
So we can't have one pass.
well, but when you grade by question, the way Canvas does it is look grade by question. And you grade the next student, the arrow, question, period. And for us, the way we grade, you have to, they want to see
Everything from 1 to 2.
every student for one question.
Decided that
And you may not need to, it depends how you grade. And for them, they want to see all of them so that they can compare them all, right? One of each. I know we've talked about
Right.
Thank you. Oh, thank you very much. And she yeah, that's right. No.
Is that the personality? So I that's the truth.
That's I appreciate it. I wish you could run.
No, I was trying to
But
say.
it's all the slack. Yeah.
But I didn't, you know,
Thank you. This is great. I love that.
listening.
Yeah, just.
Well, and of course,
No, thank you very much.
so, you'll have to go back to really speak.
I tell you.
And it happens to be. Definitive 139.
Yeah,
They do photo. They have it.
that's awesome. Thank you.
Well, hey, I think it's.
No, thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you.
They track down the 19%. He's like 100.